Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to your Daily Penguin, our waddle through my Penguin Classic library. I have that whole wall, and I've extended that wall, and it's double stacked in lots of places. There's lots and lots of penguins. I go back to that wall. I spend time at it more than almost any other place in my collection. The only other candidate would be the section that has books on... oh, actually, it's over here. The section that has books on books and book reviewing. But that corner is where I go and just stand and spend time, and sometimes bring the book back to the bed or to the couch or to the chair to spend time with the author. These mean a lot to me, which is why this tour of my penguins is informal. It's amorphous. We're bouncing around a little in time. Generally speaking, we're in the Middle Ages, but I'm not doing this in a this author died and then this author was born and then this author influenced that author kind of way that I would build, for instance, a syllabus. I'm not doing that. So you're going to notice a little bit of bouncing around here, if you haven't already, and I'm sure you have already. And today we are at 1380. We're at AD 1380, and we are once again talking about the two threads that have run throughout this first part of your Daily Penguin. Now, the March of the Penguins is not always going to include these. It's always going to include one, but the other is going to drop away. One of the strands that we've been talking along about since the beginning has been the vagaries of translation, the two different duties of a translator, the two different ideals of translation. Do you convey exactly what is on the page of the original, and you know, Godspeed the consequences, or do you take what's on the original page and transmute it into your world's not only language but also idioms and mind frames, no matter how much you have to dump off the side to get that effect through? Or, as most translators do you try to mediate between those two and then write a translator's preface apologizing for your failure? We've had to deal with the vagaries of translations many times, and we'll continue doing that because Penguin does a lot of translating. The other element that we've been dealing with since the beginning has been the pitiless ratio of the survival of ancient texts. Many times, and heartbreakingly many times, we have been talking about texts that survive in one manuscript only. And that, if you think about that, think about water rising in a basement, or moths finding that one particular cupboard, or some relative deciding the cloth of this paper is worth more than what's printed on it. I don't even know how to read, so this was given to me by some guy who used to know my father. I don't want this at all. You think about all the different chances that these things had to go through in order to get to us. And then you realize that some of those chances came down to just one copy reaching us, just one. Then you know what I mean by the pitiless ratio, and that also increases the chances that we are reading only a small prismatic little shiver of what the original was probably like, without textual variation, without many copies. And that is what we're dealing with today. We're dealing with both of those things in spades today. The pitiless ratio is evinced by the fact that this book, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, exists in only one manuscript. Only one has survived. From 1380, thereabouts. We don't know who the poet was. We don't know anything about the poet's life. An exact contemporary of Geoffrey Chaucer, about whom we know a lot, and who we do not have to worry about the pitiless ratio of survival. So it's kind of weird to think these two masters of poetry working at the same time. Did they know each other? Did they ever run across each other? And were they aware of each other's works? Certainly. They had to be aware of each other's work. Or maybe not. Maybe not. I myself think that there's a textual case to be made that Chaucer was aware of this poem, but there are plenty of scholars, plenty of people who know a lot more about it than I do, say no, absolutely not. One way or another, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is the story of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. That is the setting. That is already so well known as an ideological thing when this was done that the author doesn't need to explain what it is. It's just the setting for the story. When the winter holidays are underway and a giant green-skinned knight shows up at Camelot and challenges everyone there to a decapitation contest. You decapitate me, and if I can, I will in a year's time demand that you come to my castle and I will decapitate you. It seems like a no-brainer, no pun intended. And the knight at Arthur's table who steps forward is Sir Gawain, who is sanctimonious, not one of the fun knights, let's put it that way. Him and Galahad are in basically a race for who's the most tedious, although not to the Gawain poet's day, not at all. There was always a slight bit of fun poking at these Christ figure, sanctimonious, pure as driven snow knights. I think that the poets and balladeers, even in their own day, were perfectly happy to poke fun at them for being so perfect. But one way or another, Sir Gawain steps forward, and I don't want to spoil the story for you, but it's right there in the opening fit. The Green Knight survives his decapitation, takes his head up under his elbow and walks off. And everybody just is horrified because it means that Sir Gawain is doomed. He can't survive a beheading a year from now. And that is this story. Certain elements of it are really, really familiar. This has been translated a million times, including by J.R.R. Tolkien. It's also been done in comics. It's been done in children's books a million times. You wouldn't think so, but the graphicness of the opening is dispelled immediately because it's a fake beheading. It's not. I mean, it is real, but it doesn't hurt the Green Knight. So kids aren't going to mind. They're going to think it's fun as long as they don't try it amongst themselves. And this is the what's her name again? Petra Borner. This is the Petra Borner cover. These stylized covers that Penguin brought out a while ago. They've got matte finished paper, and they're not Penguin Classic Deluxe editions. They're just redesigned. And all of them have a little sticker on the front that says that they served as partial inspiration for Tolkien's novel The Hobbit. And I believe they were brought out with that sticker in mind when Peter Jackson's Hobbit movies were in the theaters. Some of you may be too young, but for about 35 years, every year, it was a treasured Christmas tradition. For about 35 years, Peter Jackson, the director of the great trilogy Lord of the Rings, brought out a continuation of Hobbit movies. He's been asked many times why he didn't just film it in one movie and make an all-time Hollywood classic, and his response was always, no, there's more than enough material here for 35 movies. So he did that for the span of 35 years. Every Christmas, families used to get together. I wonder what this year's Hobbit movie will be like. I wonder how many new characters there aren't in the novels it will introduce. I wonder how many conflicts and gigantic epic story arcs that completely invalidate Lord of the Rings will be presented in this year's Hobbit movie. I can't remember the details from the last movie. It was mostly just video game style action sequences of hobbits bobbling up and down on barrels on a rushing river. Can you remind me? Well, no, not really. Even Wikipedia's given up on summarizing them. After 35 years, Peter Jackson decided to lay his Hobbit 35ology to rest. And I think these things were probably pushed with that little sticker as part of an attempt to capitalize on the publicity for Peter Jackson's 35-part Hobbit adaptations. I don't know, one way or another. I don't myself see any correlation here at all, except that Tolkien knew this text and translated it. Our translation today is by Bernard O'Donoghue, who was born in County Cork in 1945, so he must be enormously old. He's certainly not 28 if he was born in 1945. Good Lord. I don't know why anybody would even listen to somebody who was born in 1945. Good Lord. Anyway, he does a very good job. This is a very tricky play or poem to translate, and that brings us to that other thread, which is the vagaries of translation, the challenges involved. And Bernard O'Donoghue actually has a note on translation that I want to read you the beginning of it, because we talk about these things on Your Daily Penguin all the time. All great poetry is untranslatable. And this is perhaps particularly true of writing like the Gawain poets, which is formally so highly wrought. As illustrated by the passage of the original included in the appendix here, the long lines of the original are principally characterized by a ringing consonantal alliteration. A little bit of redundancy there, of course, since alliteration is consonantal. It's right. If it's vowels, it's assonance, not alliteration. But that's all right. Characterized by a ringing consonantal alliteration. As most previous translators have agreed, it is not possible to sustain this alliterative pattern with 3 or more alliterating consonants in every line, without losing the precise meaning of the modern English and without sacrificing any claim to idiomatic naturalists. And I've read many translations of this poem, and most of the time I would agree that the translator is not up to the task. I don't think that's what O'Donoghue is saying in this. I think he's saying the task is not doable. But what he's really admitting in a paragraph like that is that the translator is not up to the task. Because this is not an untranslatable poem. And for a long time, reading a lot, I read and knew really well the Penguin Classic mass market paperback. I don't have it anymore. I forget who did it. And many others besides. I've read many, and Tolkien's and many others, translators into English of this poem. For a long time, I guess I might have believed that it's so strange, the original is so strange that you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it in English without it being just so off-puttingly weird that the story got lost. But for 10 years, I was the managing editor of an online literary journal called Open Letters Monthly. I started by myself and 2 friends of mine in 2007. And at the beginning there, we had very few contributions. We didn't have any traction. Our name wasn't known. We hadn't published anything that anybody would notice. And we poured our heart and soul into it. And when you have an endeavor like that, where you're pouring your heart and soul into it, and your goal, we were a monthly publication, and our goal was every month was a desperate scramble to build a table of contents for the upcoming month. Because the last thing in the world that you want to do is get to the first of the next month and realize or have to admit that you have only 3 pieces when what you're looking for is a table of contents of anywhere between 8 and 15 pieces. We did a couple of poems and we did reviews and essays. And you wanted, as an editor, you wanted in the course of that intervening month to pull together as much stuff as you could for the upcoming month that was good. Now, at Open Letters Monthly, we typically didn't pay contributors, and at the beginning, nobody knew who we were, so we couldn't promise anybody, any kind of recognition, of renown of any kind. And when you're in a position like that, you're at the mercy of what you can scrounge together. You can't publish just anything. So that was always our main terror, is that we'd have nothing but junk, and you can't publish junk. Not all the time, anyway. You can have a couple of junky writers in a table of contents, especially if they're a kind of relatable junk. But you can't. You know what I mean. You are at the mercy of what you can get. And in the early years of Open Letters Monthly, a friend of one of the founding editors decided to give us his ongoing translation of this poem, which he simply called Green. His name was Adam Glasky. And when I heard that he was going to do that, I thought, okay, well, I've read all the English translations of this poem, and they all fail in various interesting ways. I wonder which way you'll fail. And he didn't. He didn't fail. He did exactly the thing that Bernard O'Donoghue in that translator's note says can't be done. And I don't know what happened to Green. We published as many installments of Green as Adam Glasky would give us. But Open Letters Monthly eventually transformed into its current incarnation, Open Letters Review, and part of what accompanied that was a change of website. A mass porting of material over from one site to another, and the consequent shutting down of the Open Letters Monthly archive site, which was a coding nightmare and didn't seem worth the while to keep. So we tried to pull everything off there, get it into lifeboats, and eventually bring it somewhere else. And I haven't checked before this video. I don't know if Green ever made it or is published anywhere else. But it was an education for me. It proved to me that I had been underestimating what could be done with English when it comes to translating this poem. So I now, if Adam can do it, then someone else can do it. So I now know that this is a very worthy translation. This is a very neat, attractive Penguin Classic. I do recommend it. If you've somehow never read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, I recommend it. But Where once I would have been complacent about Bernard O'Donoghue's translator's note there, just saying all poetry is untranslatable, and this poem in particular, I now know that isn't true. I would once have nodded along and said, well, okay, you're excusing what are going to be your own flaws when I turn to your translation, and that's understandable. Okay, fine. Now I know what this poem sounds like in modern English. Now I know what it sounds like. Now I know what it sounds like to hear this the way, for instance, Chaucer might have heard it in his own English or whatever language. I think that's probably going to spoil me for all other translations. I mean, Bernard O'Donoghue's translation is very good, but I have read Adam Glasky's Green, and I don't know where it is. I will look around. If it is available online, I'll try to remember to leave a link to it down below. But it could just be gone. One of those horrible things that are just gone when a magazine closes up shop or drastically changes shop. We shall see. I will do my best to find it for you. But that is your Penguin Classic for today. It's a tried and true thing. A lot of you probably encountered this in school. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight it's a rollicking good story, and it's fascinating. There are fascinating verse experiments going on all throughout it, and the good translators really bring that forward. They do a little more than just convey the story. So. We're going to wrap this up for now. That is your Daily Penguin, and I will be back tomorrow with something else. We are still firmly ensconced in the Middle Ages, so I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.